great compared to how it used to be. I don't want to compare myself to people who actually know how to edit.
You're all a bunch of losers! Here we go!
Welcome back to our Periscope and our YouTube. Lovers, friends, boys and gentlemen, fat and skinny, short and tall, par for the course, Lee Ran, good to see you guys. Just wanted to let you know that, wow, have our videos on YouTube been going up like crazy the last few days. You know, each one of those videos, they run for 20 to 30 minutes. They take me 4 hours, 4 hours, Limbo Jacket, to actually produce and then put onto YouTube. To cut out all of the R and the and people's comments and add the music and mix in great editing. That would be depressing. So go have a listen and you'll see some of your comments on Periscope that you make will appear on YouTube immortalized, dear Stella. So I think in our last one I just did was talking about being accused or living in a world where you can get accused or not have your story believed. We're talking about that situation, a broader version of the Kavanaugh effect, and I just put that up on YouTube and it's been great. We now get like between 20 and 50 people watching each video, which is obviously nothing, but compared to how 2 years ago on YouTube when I started, I used to get like 1 or 2 views. The intro, yeah, it's cool, right? Like it's I'm very happy with that. I owe it to you guys. Together on Periscope the last 2 years has sort of been a way of, you could call it fermenting James Cameron and Stella, turning us via this symbiotic iterative improvement relationship into something that has now entered the YouTube world. And perhaps together, Dr. Samira, we can continue to learn from each other, making this world a better place, if at all possible. Good to see you. So, oh, by the way, I've got to tell you guys about the podcast. This is a unique podcast. This is not on Periscope or YouTube. You can grab it at @Autism at Twitter. I just tweeted it out. It's on Anchor. Good to see Universal Truth. And it is a 4-minute episode of Pompous, Eagle, Auntie May, and myself just having random conversations. So you may find that interesting. It's called Gabsmacked, of course, and it's at anchor.fm/Gabsmacked. You can go, yeah, it's funny. It's 4 minutes of fun, and Pompous gives me a hard time. Auntie May made me some tea. Thank you for inviting followers, bot. And Eagle spoke to me about focusing on the thesis, which has been absolutely shredding of any energy you think you have to borrow. That's what a thesis does to you. Really, I was not expecting that. Auntie May is awesome. It was all about the chocolate. That's right. Pompous just cares about chocolate, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, hello everybody again on YouTube. We're back. So, instead of doing a 4-hour editing of this video, I'm going to try and pause it live. So, the black hole of everything that was. This will be in one of the upcoming books. And living a life with autism is like constantly being around birds that I run the risk of spooking. And it is mostly because without the intuition of knowing how to function in public, it's so much easier on Periscope. I can sit here, I can talk, I see a comment. When you're on the outside, when you're in the real world, I actually met someone who watches almost all of my YouTube videos, and you would notice, I could tell, I didn't know how to act exactly, and I defaulted back to my normal scenario in real life, which is, oh, great, that's good. Oh, so I don't really know what to do in those points because there's so much more in terms of body language and how someone's sitting. If they're sitting down and I'm standing, is that different to when we're both standing? I was outside, they were inside, I opened the door. Good morning, Lulu. Do I then walk into the door? Do I stay back? There's too many variables, so I just freeze because I don't have enough horsepower, mental horsepower to concentrate on interaction, plus all of the extra physical details that are required. But I'll be talking about this at the speech in Bega on Friday the 12th of October. Isn't that cool that multiples of 7 in October of this year land on a Sunday? You know what that means? That means in November they should land on a Wednesday, if I am correct. Someone can check that up, and yes, this is going on YouTube, so if I'm wrong, it'll be remembered as being wrong for all eternity. Being around birds that I run the risk of spooking. This is the thing about the autist gene. You are constantly trying to figure out whether the next move you do is going to be the one that scares people away. The memory I have is very clear from the age of 3. It is the reaction that I would get from people, even my age, at age of 3, is the same, and I'm now able to articulate it, the same as the reaction that you might get if you sneeze in public. If anyone's noticed, if you ever sneeze in public, people back away just a little bit. Is it a mental illness, autism? No, it's a mental disorder. And disorder doesn't mean defective. It means that the brain functions in a different way. And so it has its own unique advantages and disadvantages. If you're a low functioning autistic, that's different to being a high functioning autistic. I am not only high functioning, but have a savant level intellect, which means that the disparity in my brain is still quite significant. I lack a lot of basic intuitions in order of social function, but there are some things that I can do unbelievably well according to professional metrics. So I don't say that on my own behalf. You deal with mental illness? Ah, yes. I think I wouldn't be surprised. Look, to me, mental illness, even though that's a different topic, mental illness is similar to, breaking a leg, catching a cold. You can easily fall into having a mental illness, even if you might be more naturally predisposed to it. And you can also, of course, help offset it. When people sneeze, you dive into the spray zone. Well, you are a unique individual. Give me adrenaline. Interesting stuff. When one grows up with people moving away from them in a way that Moses couldn't part the Red Sea, that's how divisive I can be on a subconscious or very subtle level with people in real life. What happens is that it actually teaches you to accept the loneliness, and the loneliness is actually the only thing reliable in your life. And so the loneliness and the pain of the loneliness actually becomes your closest friend. And so it provides a feeling of comfort. And that can cause you to deliberately sabotage certain friendships because you would rather have the loneliness because you know it's reliable. Where making new friends, biohazard, is not reliable because you don't know the day that will come. Beware the Ides of March, the day that the friendship itself is stabbed in the back by your best friend, being loneliness itself, that wants you offer itself. Yes. And this is something deeply inbred into someone from a very young age. So I have very, very clear memories of being age 3 and being ostracized, but not in a way that was malicious. It was in a way, looking back, making sense. It was the way that it happened was that when you walked past a group of children or people my age at the time, they would slightly step away or talk amongst themselves without me understanding what they were talking about, as if I wasn't even there, like a ghost in a way. So absolutely not their fault. Come on, I mean, they're children. They don't know. What happens is that seemingly unrelated events can actually be driven by the same need for loneliness to push people away, because it is the one thing that keeps you comfort or keeps you company. And so, for example, quitting a university degree, for example, before having the opportunity to fail, can actually be powered by the same reason that you think the worst of yourself when a guy or girl doesn't call you back. One of them is retroactive and one is proactive. So you are dropping out of the degree because you know that you're going to fail, quote unquote, no. And the other one is when the other person stops talking to you. In other words, they're the one who've left for whatever reason, could be anything. Why didn't you call? Exactly it. Then you also think it was from the same thing, that you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough to actually be in that person's company. That can be summarized as saying anticipating rejection from one while simultaneously experiencing it from the next. Okay, so it's anticipating rejection from the first whilst expecting it from the next. They seem completely unrelated. And if you look back in your life, you might see very unrelated circumstances that actually might be fueled by that same thing. Now, I am summarizing my Wednesday wisdom with my doc, so this is obviously related to myself, but people, of course, do identify with that, which is great. One of the common themes with autism is hypersensitivity to stimuli. And growing up, I had specific locations in all of the regular places I would visit, my grandparents' place, the school, the swimming area, where I could escape memories of painful feelings of rejection by finding dark rooms as a child. And so, for example, at my grandparents' place, there was a specific room that was temperate in climate and was sealed off from the majority of stimuli, TV, sound, and I would sit there and obviously not do this, but I would sit there and allow the mind to calm down and for memories and feelings of disdain, of pain, feelings of dejection, itambuka, all of them to seep away out of a clogged up mind that could only do so in rooms such as those. The stimulus was unbelievably high. Now, of course, as I said before, it does have advantages. So if one can focus that ability, which I've learned to do recently, it allows you to learn languages very quickly and other types of things, which I've mentioned before. Okay, those rooms that my younger self went into, and I still do this today. So I'm normally awake at night and it's now raining outside. It's quite beautiful. The lights are quite dim. I have a little bit of an extra light on now just for the camera, which I've learned to do. Got to go to the gym. All the best. Give me adrenaline. Go get that adrenaline. Go. The rooms were restorative. That is a powerful word to say. The rooms were restorative, and I didn't know as a child that they were restorative. I just knew that I couldn't leave that room for whatever reason. And people would come in sometimes and try to turn on the lights and disrupt and create extra noise, which is actually quite traumatizing for someone with autism. The rooms were restorative via avoiding overstimulation. And once again, not knowing that I had autism, I didn't know that that was something that people with autism actually have as a trait. It was not me being crazy or weird in a way that's not understandable or predictable these days. So what my younger brain would do would be to find certain reactions that were in common. Someone just asked a question to cut out what I was just saying. People with autism can develop symptoms of dejection as a consequence of perceived rejection. So with autism, one doesn't understand the difference in perception and reality. That's why I focus so much on the difference in perception and reality in so many of my scopes now, because I've come to learn that after the diagnosis. I've spent, I don't know how many hours of research trying to understand this, plus because I've been the subject of a countless amount of studies now at various universities, given my unique condition and being on a guest member on an advisory board for autism. So I've come to see what they're testing for and given them feedback, but simultaneously learning from them. So what the person with autism can do is, because they're getting rejected, because they're getting rejected or perceived to be rejected, which they consider to be actual rejection, what they do is they tie that rejection with the one variable. Thank you. So what someone with autism might do is say, well, the one constant in every single scenario in my whole life, by the time I was a teenager, right? For example, I came to this realization. The one variable was me. So therefore I must be worthy of rejection. This is what happens at a younger age. I talk about this in my first book. I'll get to this on YouTube actually, because we're doing that series. Once I finish my thesis, I'll get into that. Now, someone on Periscope just said the autism doesn't have anything to do with being smart. It sort of does and sort of doesn't. So in my case, with autism, what happens is that you have an uneven distribution of brain function. So if you were let's just say a neurotypical and you had an IQ, an average IQ, the person with autism equivalent would have part of their brain having an under average IQ and part having an above average IQ. And it's the same case with myself. So I would have been possibly someone who had an IQ of 130 or 140, let's just say, which is reasonably smart, top 10, 5% of the population, but it's not genius smart. But what's happened is that part of my brain has an IQ of 100 and part has an IQ that's immeasurable because it's higher than almost anyone's on the planet. So in terms of the distribution, autism has that effect. But in terms of general intelligence, I don't think is as directly related, no. IQ with how smart you are. It depends on how you define smart. But it depends also which domain you're working in. So if you saw me in public, you would not get the same impression. And I know this because every time I go in public, I'm quite good at attracting people who think that there's some sort of mental retardation with me because of the way I'm acting. It's not exactly fitting in, and I have mastered quite well, but if you hang out long enough with me, you'll notice. And I say that because that's what happens constantly, and especially under the amount of tests that I've had. I can say that with a much higher level of confidence these days. So what happens is that this teenage version of myself, and probably other people with autism or other people with certain things that don't allow them to have theory of mind, what happens is that those people then say, oh, I am worthy of I am worthy of rejection. That's what the teenage version says. I must be the loser and the mentally deficient person and the scum and the disease and the parter of the Red Sea of people that I am being treated as opposed to what you realize as a much older person, being myself now, which is that the conclusion, as I've always said to you guys, the conclusion is different to the observation. You can observe that you are being rejected, but the conclusion is not necessarily that you are worthy of rejection. The conclusion could also be that there are some characteristics within you that allow you to be perceived as someone worthy of rejection. But because you haven't yet learned to display the parts of you in such a way and negotiate with society in such a way that allows people to see the person that you actually are. Now, Periscope and YouTube has allowed me to do that quite well, have both allowed me to do that quite well in comparison. And we can tell we have much more higher level of engagement here and much lower level of rejection. And so therefore, and hence, as a potential conclusion, it would be much more plausible to say that to my younger self, if I could go back and say that you are not necessarily worthy of rejection. And that's inconsistent. It's actually a much more nuanced conclusion. Clown is someone on Periscope, by the way, guys. To summarize everything I just said there, one of the common things in all these painful situations is me, for the younger self. But it does not necessarily mean, that me as a person or I as a person am deficient or not of worth in some way. It just means that I, the teenage self, was having a repeated experience of something which seems similar in all of these situations. And it's very important for you guys to know. So this could be generalized and abstracted outwards to, let's say that dogs run away from you, or let's say every time you go past I can't even think of a good example right now. Let's say that, every time you go out on a date with a guy or a girl, they don't call you back after 3 dates. It doesn't mean that you're necessarily anything bad. It means that perhaps, like I said, that there might be something within your behavior that's not allowing them to see who you are in a way that people would appreciate. That's a different story. And it's a much more plausible version. The thinking that there must be one conclusion and that it's one dimensional and there's one variable really doesn't make sense in anything. And we've been saying that all this time, right, about every topic we talk about. The whole section there is labeled as difference in experience and conclusion from an experience. So there's a difference between an experience and a conclusion from an experience. Very important to remember that in your life whenever you get knocked down and thoughts come to your head about, oh, look, again, this happened, there must be something wrong with me. You're not even going to realize in most cases, at least I didn't, that that's what your brain is telling you. You have to actually consciously realize that that's what's going on and remember to tell yourself the other thing. In fact, I put these in my calendar, bits and pieces of these, and I put them in writing, and I'm going to be putting these probably in the third book by the time I finish writing even the second book. The other thing that people can apply, and I'm going to talk about this in a separate scope, which is about adding value to facts, and that's a whole different topic which I want to get to, and we spoke about that using atoms and building blocks, but not getting into that today. What happens is that you can subconsciously question whether you're a good or a bad person, because the brain might say to itself, I must be bad if everyone rejects me. I had undiagnosed autism, but I just thought I must have been a reject. Now, they're not the same thing. But that's what the brain naturally thinks of itself. Worse is that you yourself, as Larry King actually said today, he said when Hitler brushes his hair, he probably doesn't think I'm a bad person. And even us, which no one, I don't think any one of us comes even near that. And so it applies even more in this case. You believe that your intentions are so pure. And I know in my case, to me, it was all about intent. It's all about, I want to make other people I want to help other people. I want to share what I have with other people. That's always been who I am. And some people call it altruistic. I call it selfish because it makes me feel better when I help other people. So it's actually selfish if you want to go far enough. However, that actually makes things worse, because if you believe that you want to make other people happy and it's resulting in you being rejected, then you think you must somehow be even worse than evil, because intentions don't matter. Even the intentions that you do have that you think are useful are in fact not useful, of no value, or at least no positive value. Now, this might only relate to my autistic brothers and sisters. Good to see you, Carol. Is that what I value as pure intentions seem, and this has always been the case in my life, insecurity, yep, seem not to be valued by society collectively. So society seems to, especially in your darkest days, reward the liar, reward the cheat, reward the person who looks after themselves. And that's a very cynical, very one-dimensional version, because it depends what you mean by reward. If you're in it for the money, then yes, it would most likely reward you if you show more of those characteristics that, say, run antithetical to the definition of pure intent. So it actually rendered me humiliated and exposed. Shame. Shame is a very common emotion that someone with autism can feel after being rejected for so long. They're open and exposed. They're trying to be who they are and are being rejected for it. It seems that they're being rejected for it. And so shame, humiliation, exposition, combination of that, deadly and can lead to suicide. If there is something very deficient about me, therefore, I should be ashamed. The feeling of being repellent, that's the feeling that you can have if you're an undiagnosed autistic adolescent. You can feel repellent. And that feeling of being repellent can become reliable and a familiar friend. This is what we spoke about at the beginning. When the world was repelled, it was the repellent which stayed with me. And this is the contradiction of the repellent nature. You don't let the lie of rejection speak to you. Very good point. Absolutely. So you develop a relationship with this unpleasant feeling, like a dark spirit that was reliable when people were not. It was a dark spirit, reliable when people were not. The dark spirit talks to you and says, look at all them, they always leave you, but I won't leave you. The loneliness will stay with you. And I remember not thinking this consciously, but I do remember understanding that to be the case metaphorically at school, many lunchtimes when I would stay away from people in general, either in the toilet or in the music center once I had that built. What was being looked for by me in people was a replacement to that reliable spirit. But people always let me down in my mind growing up. People could never match up to the standard of this dark spirit, because the dark spirit by definition will be with you when no one's around. That's what it is. It's axiomatically with you when no one's around. And so because people are not around, it's with you. It can't leave you unless other people are there. But when people are there, there's a chance of them leaving you, which means that as a backup, the dark spirit, which repels people, will be there. And so it's a sick relationship in a way with a sociopathic boyfriend or girlfriend, someone who treats you so badly, and yet you want them there because you know that they'll never leave you. In a way, they'll always come back. Something like that. You rely on them. Somehow they feel like home. And it's actually normal to seek attachments, actually in this way, growing up as a child. As a child, apparently, according to my doc, he says it's absolutely normal. And it's not only normal, it's essential for your survival. When you're a baby, he said, it's sort of like, imagine that you are walking down the street as an adult in the city. You suddenly become very dizzy. Someone might have spiked a drink or something. You're walking down the street. You're about to fall down. Your mind is, say, expanded beyond the walls of your skull. You are afraid that someone's going to take advantage of you. There's no medical attention around. He said that's somehow analogous to being a child. And so you need your mother and father or parent or guardian or whomever it might be looking after you. You need them to be in tune with you, not because you are good or bad or they are good or bad, but you physically need that for your survival. Because without that, then the pain that you're experiencing as a child that you can't articulate or understand or conceptualize becomes a pain that gets worse with every minute, and you don't know how to get rid of it. So you live in a state of anxiety. Now, if you have undiagnosed autism, especially in the 80s, it's not possible for a parent to meet your needs. they can be the best people in the world. It's absolutely actually not possible if you go back in time, because there was no understanding of autism in many parts of the world, including my own. And so those needs were not met. And that's consistent with myself being from the age of 2. I could not speak until about the age of 2 or further onwards in life. But I cried almost every single night for 2 years. And that is a autistic child that cannot have its needs met. And so we're very lucky, I would say, if anyone has a child diagnosed with autism in today's society as compared to the 80s. And unfortunately, that level of anxiety never actually disappeared. All right, YouTube, we're back. Some people asked some great questions. Clown said that might be why people, how to reach them. Yes, that's why people may have, who are raised in broken families might try to compensate for that with some sort of relationship as a teenager, maybe, some sort of boyfriend or girlfriend, etc. And someone also asked whether I felt rejected by my parents, and my response was that I don't think that was conscious. And as an adult, I recognize that my parents are 2 of the best people I've ever met in my life and probably ever will meet, and are amazing human beings. But that's separate to being a parent raising almost a half alien as someone with autism in the 80s, when autism was not really understood or known to be even a thing in most parts of the world, even in the first world. So, is this abstract feeling old? This feeling of rejection, this feeling of being a repellent, is this feeling old? Well, we deduced that it's most likely old because many scenarios are all consistent with being fueled by that feeling. So at school, thinking that kids hated me or the teachers hated me when maybe they just didn't understand me. Trying to have a fear of success, for example, in the past, or trying to show people how smart I was or be appreciated or be loved. Pathologically, excessively, unusually, significantly deviating from what you would expect to be the mean of display that people would make. Therefore, you would expect that if that one thing is driving all of those various scenarios, then that one thing can be abstracted from all of those scenarios, which would mean that that one thing has existed before those scenarios occurred. And so it must be very old, almost as old as who I am. And then you can take it back and realize that it has to do with being an undiagnosed autistic child. Yes, I would say a lot of people say that who read the book, who are able to get through it. They say that basically what you're saying, which was my life was similar to everyone else's, but in overdrive. Now, this not meeting the child's needs is independent of the mother's intent. We come back to intent. And this was ironic because we were talking about how my intentions were not valued in society in the way I wanted them to be. And yet here we have a mother whose intentions were of the utmost purity, like any great mother would, put their child's life before theirs. And yet, irrespective of that intent, a mother living in a world where people don't understand what autism is cannot meet those needs. And that's the tragedy right there. You can't blame anyone in that. What you can do is make scopes and YouTubes and help other people learn from those mistakes. Or lack of knowledge, just to say. Okay, we're back. So our good friend Clown on Periscope just said that sometimes employers, I'm summarizing, but sometimes employers can take advantage of the fact that someone is deliberately working excessively hard to seek approval. Yes, absolutely. And that's conflated with having an agreeable temperament. So that can happen with, apparently, it's almost half men, half women, but it's slightly skewed towards more women than men. But thanks for the insight. You have to get back to work. Have a blessed day. Thank you to you too. It was a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to share that with all of you. That was our Wednesday Wisdom for this Thursday. And until next time, everyone on YouTube, don't forget to take life one smack at a time. Boom.